To start this off, I want to make sure we're talking about inclusion. I want to do a land recognition, so to the Hellenic people who were here and continue to be here. They were here before semiconductors, before blue bottle coffee was a thing. So it's important to mention that. Also, thank you, family, friends, for being here, and Cloudflare for hosting me. I just want to note that that's probably, you do network security, is that correct?
Yes.
It's like the coolest tech name in San Francisco. Okay. So I'm going to get into it. I'm at a stoplight. Is it uncomfortable? Okay. I'm at a stoplight. And you know that feeling you get when someone's looking at you? Maybe the hair on your arm starts to raise up a little bit, break into a cold sweat. Well, I get this feeling. I'm at a stoplight, and I look up, and across the street, there's a man. Blue overcoat, red plaid shirt, chocolate shoes, dusty jeans, looking at me. The light turns green, and I walk toward him, and he walks toward me. And it's a Sunday, so I'm about to greet him and say Happy Sunday. Before I can say anything, he cuts me off. And he says, how about you and your disabled friends find a car and drive out of San Francisco? Interesting. So I was born with a disability. I'm not new. Kind of atypical interactions with the world, society, humans included, is not new to me. But I'm in San Francisco, and this kind of threw me off guard. So a lot of emotions started going through me. There was anger, there was confusion, there was a little bit of surprise. But I can tell you the one thing that permeated the surface was complete and utter relief. Because I had begun starting to talk about disability and design, and I had crafted a point of view that I'm going to share with you, but I didn't have an opening. My name is Josh Halstead. Like I said, I was born with a disability. I'm a designer at a fintech called Opportune. And being a designer and having a disability have been the through lines in my life and my career. It's important to talk about this because we have 1.3 billion individuals, the last time I checked, last time I counted, identifying as disabled. So this morning I'm going to talk to you about 3 dominant paradigms of disability. This talk is going to be about disability and design. I'm going to talk at you for about 20 minutes. If you have questions, if you have ideas, better yet, please be sure to capture them in any way possible. So here's the first paradigm of disability. This man saw my body as a problem. And he saw my body as a problem because my body is not normal, right? So me, I'm a designer, and I'm an unrepentant questioner as an effect of that. And I asked 2 questions. The first was, when did it become not okay to deviate from being normal? And the second, even far further back, is what does it even mean to be normal in the first place? And after researching and committing myself to those questions, I found out that normal is nothing but a construct, completely manufactured. So I want to share that with you today first. And that's going to take me back to 1796. A man by the name of Adolphe Quetelet was born in Belgium. By the age of 19, he's already somewhat of a scientific prodigy. So he studies statistics, mathematics. He lectures on the history of science. Quetelet studied movement. That means that he would study terrestrial magnetism. He would quantify the history of stars. He would quantify weather patterns and blooming patterns. All of these he saw as unwieldy phenomena, kind of like my hair in the morning, uncontrollable. And he sought to concretize them, lock them down with numbers. It's because of Quetelet that we have something called the law of error curve, or you might be more familiar with the standard deviation. What Quetelet did was that he met up with his astrologist friends, and he was out to define the average human being. He was a statistician. His goal was to define the average human being. So he met up with his astrologer friends, and they didn't have iPhones back then. So how they would find stars is they would take guesses. They would have 5 guesses, right? They guess 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And from those guesses, they would take them all together and they would average them up. And the mean, the average of that, the sum total of those 5 guesses became the most likely coordinate of a given star. Now, Gidley did the same thing, but he applied that to human features. Height, weight. Overnight, we have a statistically defined human being. This set the groundwork for things like the BMI. Is anyone on the keto diet right now?
Not mine.
Great. A way to meter yourself against a subset of a population, right? So statistically understand what maybe overweight, average weight, and underweight, right? That's the BMI, right? We don't have that until K to Lake. We also don't have things like the IQ test, a way to quantify your reasoning capacity against an appropriate age bracket. So this was good, and we have the average human being, but as this model develops, we have someone else on the scene, and that's Sir Francis Galton. Francis Galton is a eugenicist. You know what I mean when I say that? You might have heard eugenics in association with the Holocaust. In the simplest terms, everyone to the left of this deviation should be taken out of society, right? So if you remember, Quetelet was creating the normal human being with the average. Galton wanted everyone from the center line moving forward, and he had to change the equation. Because in Quetelet's equation, the outliers were fine. They were neutral. There was no politicizing of that model. But Galton swapped out, I'm going to take you back to statistics class, swapped out the mean, changed it for the median. Yeah? And all of a sudden you have a hierarchy of normal. It becomes okay to erase everyone from this side of the curve. Normal becomes ideal. And when it's okay to erase anyone from the right side of this curve, and you don't plan on them being around. If you don't plan on them being around, you don't design for them, right? So not only do we have an ideal normal, but overnight we have deficient and desirable. Design worthy and design afterthought. We don't have a wheelchair user in architectural guidelines until 1981. I want you to imagine that you enjoy something about this topic. Now that I've talked about eugenics. And you want to know more, right? So you and I, we go grab some coffee afterward at one of these fancy schmancy San Francisco coffee shops, right? One of those coffee shops that has a loft where you can kind of go up and view the frenetic energy that is San Francisco. And we decided to go there. We're talking more about your questions, and we decide, okay, well, we're going to order and we're going to go up to the loft. So you grab your coffee and you go up 1, 2, 3 flights of stairs, and you turn around and you say, oh my gosh, you notice that I didn't follow you. And then you look at me and I look at you. And then it gets a little awkward. Just like sit in this awkwardness. So normal gets concretized into our design groups. Now, I don't hold a grudge. Actually, it's these stairs, the stairs that make me normalize my body, they actually position my body as a problem. I would have to overcome my disability in order to interface with these stairs. But it's these stairs that made me a designer. If I wanted to draw, I had to design a way to do that. If I fell in love with art so much that I wanted to go to art school, I had to design a way to do that. Anyone that went to art school knows you have to cut out a bunch of posters. That's when you learn all those kind of key command shortcuts on Illustrator, Design, Photoshop, right? If I continued from art school and then wanted to practice as a professional, that means not only did I need to know how to cut out posters and do the shorthand key commands, but I also needed to design a way to answer a bunch of emails. That's what they don't tell you in Zen. Right? They also don't tell you that you're going to have to learn PowerPoint. So. You're welcome. And I wish I could tell you every single one of those stories, but we have a limited amount of time here. So I'm going to tell you one. And that's the way that I designed a way to draw. And admittedly, I've been a little misleading. Actually, I didn't design a way for me to draw at all. It actually features my favorite designer of all time, and that's my mom. She's actually here today, in the back there. Just got off the plane. So my mom realized that I had an incredibly creative mind from an early age. Overactive. Why? Because I argued about everything. Everything. And she figured, well, the next logical step is to create an outlet for that argumentation. That might be art. So one night, I'm learning how to say colors for the first time: red, blue, green. And my mom had this idea, well, wouldn't it be nice if you could also color the color as I was talking? So we're at the table, and on the corner of the table, there's a bunch of rubber bands. My mom is the first design thinker I've ever known. She has an epiphany. She grabs one of the rubber bands, she wraps it around my hand, and she puts a marker underneath, and all of a sudden, I start my art career. Now, the pro of this is that I'm an artist now and continue practicing. The con is that a rubber band isn't the most stable mechanism to draw for long periods of time. Further, my arm muscles were developing and I got arm fatigue. So there was a need for a second design prototype, second of three. And if my mom were telling us, she would always caveat this next section with, okay, don't judge me. So the design problem is instability. So how did she remedy that? The next prototype was made out of duct tape. It works. I probably don't have to tell you too much about the cons. I still can't grow over here. So fantastic, stability issue is solved. It's a little painful, so there's a need for a third prototype. So my mom is an antiquer and she finds herself at a garage sale and sees a wetsuit and notices the materiality of what it's made out of. Purchases the wetsuit, she also sews, takes it home, cuts a strip out of the wetsuit, makes a U shape. This is called a cuff here on the right. It was the perfect combination. It provided stability, it also provided flexibility. I used the cuff for the next 12, 15 years of my life. Not only did it allow me to continue doing art, it allowed me to start painting. Not only did it allow me to start painting, but it also gave me the ability to feed myself for the first time. It's the image that you see on the right. I was also a part of a bunch of punk rock bands. Believe it or not, that might be a shocker to you. This cuff was used to help me hold a drumstick. So it was a modular product. This story illustrates a second model of disability, in which we start to separate impairment from a disabling society. So my impairment is called arthrogryposis multiplex congenital. Does anyone want to repeat that? Are you sure? And in that story above, prior, I'm thinking about it in PowerPoint slides. The pen became the artifact of a disabling society. It wasn't the fact that I didn't have the ability to grab the pen, it was the fact that there wasn't a pen available that fastened to a hand and didn't grab. So this is another paradigm of disability, and that started to come in actually in the 60s and 70s. So if I can give you an analogy, just to kind of frame this up. How this would work is if you had an SUV, you have an SUV, and I asked you to parallel park in Hayes Valley, right? There's no inherent problem with you having an SUV. If you're in Southern California, where I'm from, actually it's kind of cool. Yeah? But it's because of how our society, and Hayes Valley specifically, is constructed, that it becomes a problem in that context. Likewise with disability, right? Hayes Valley is set up for Priuses, or Prii. Does anyone know the plural of Prius and Prii? Like I feel like if the three of us go down to Yosemite, we travel in a Jackal Prii. That's beside the point. But you get this point, right? So this social model of disability, like I said, has been around for a while. So we have an individual by the name of Ed Roberts. He applies to UC Berkeley, gets accepted, and then gets denied soon after they find out that he has a disability. 62. Roberts was diagnosed with polio from an early age. He became a wheelchair user. He also used an iron lung to aid in his respiratory system. What happened was that dorm rooms were not designed to accommodate an iron lung. Now, he didn't take no for an answer, and he got creative with some friends and some allies, and they eventually found a space for him to dorm, and he continued into his undergraduate and graduate studies. He got re-accepted, studied political science. Now, in the transition from his undergraduate to graduate degrees, he transitioned from a manual wheelchair to an electrically powered wheelchair. And that means that for the first time he had a little bit more autonomy. So he soon found out that curbs that didn't have ramps stopped him from getting class. He had to find all of these different alternative routes to get to class, right? Where that wasn't a factor before. Further, you can imagine if you're a graduate student in political science at Berkeley, you're going to celebrate once you finish the big final, right? So I want you to imagine being invited to a party after you just finish this big final, and you get to the bar, and there's a curb in front of you in the door, and you can't get it. He's a political science major, but I can tell you what, there's no better motivation to be a political activist. So him and his friends go to the city of Berkeley, and they lobby for the installation of curb cuts across the entire city. They are successful. Berkeley institutes 15 choice locations that would spread over time. From 1972 to 1976, the disability community in Berkeley spikes from 400 to 5,000. Why? Because Berkeley is the most accessible place in the United States. That's simple. With respect to infrastructure, yes, but also considering culture. So Roberts is also fostering a place where people with disabilities can come and celebrate disability as a unique identity, as a culture. If you think about the 60s in Berkeley and the Bay Area, it's a hotbed of activism. Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, right? Lots of things are going on, and this kind of amalgamation of culture and identity turned into the disability rights movement. A movement that advocated for accessibility into buildings, into schools, outside of institutions, as a civil right. Not a nice to have, not an option. So they would go on and protest for that right. The first time they protested was in 1977 under a bill that was passed much earlier in 1973 called the Rehabilitation Act, that basically made it illegal for any entity receiving public financial assistance to discriminate on the basis of disability, aka their buildings have to be accessible at that point, right? Fast forward a far way, we have 1990. Have we heard of the Americans with Disabilities Act? an important one to know. That was also fought by and won through the disability community protesting over and over and over and over again. So here's a list that I'm not going to explain to you. It might come up later in the presentation. But the point being is that what we think of as accessibility is law. It has been law for a while. Right? It's not a nice to have, it's not an actual thing. Further, this thing that we think about as inclusion with people with disability, I would consider it just to be good QA. If we're going to make things accessible, we should probably have the users testing this. So I have been tracking this thing called inclusive design. Fantastic. Anyone familiar with that? It's to design inclusively. And as you can see, my inbox gets filled up every day. I've been tracking it. The good thing is that designers, as a design mainstream, we are taking the social model of disability seriously. We have big players such as IKEA getting on board. We have Google collaborating with the Ability Project at NYU to make open source accessible technology using artificial intelligence, a fantastic project. We also have disability being featured at Davos. So this is all great. We're getting a lot of screen time. Fantastic. Why did I get you out of bed? Why am I here? Because I don't think we're going far enough. I think that as a design mainstream, we've been operating under a partial model of disability. The social model is self-professed by Michael Oliver, the one who founded it, coined it as being incomplete, not a complete understanding of disability. So, as designers, we might be shifting away from wanting to normalize bodies. We have other practitioners that do that still, which is okay. I'm glad to know that. But we are moving into normalizing the way in which we interact. If we're only considering the misalignments between someone's impairment and the environment. So I'll give you an example. I need two friends. Okay, so can we be honest with that? I'm going to give you roles. So, it's okay. Yeah, sure. I didn't rehearse this, so why not? This is perfect. Okay, so you stand here. What's your name? Cut. Cut? Darren? Okay, awesome. So, Cut, you're going to be an optometrist. Okay? Yeah? Okay, perfect. You ready? An optometrist. That's someone you prescribe eyeglasses. Oh, perfect. And you're going to be a technologist. Are you a technologist? It was a safe bet. See you. Okay, cool. So I'm not going to see you at the same time. You're my two friends. I'm just going to give you a statement. Okay? I'm going to meet Cut first, and I'm going to say, I'm just going to tell you that, hey, I'm losing my eyesight. Okay? And you're going to respond by saying, oh my gosh, that's awful. I'm wondering what you're going to lose when you lose your eyesight. How can I help you see better? Now, because you're a really good salesman too, right? You say, okay, I know the solution to that. I can prescribe eyeglasses. So I'm going to take you to the showroom, and I'm going to show you all the glasses, and I'm going to show you the most stylish pair of glasses. I'm not going to tell you the price. And I'll send you down there, and you pick these glasses, and then you let me know they're $700. Oh my gosh, I can't afford that. I live in San Francisco. I have to buy a $7 coffee after this. And say, thank you so much, but I can't take the glasses. And Darren, so I meet you afterward, right? And I say the same thing because I haven't found the response that I'm looking for. So I say, hey, Darren, I'm just going to say a statement. I'm losing my eyesight. And you say, how often? How can I help you gain sight? How can I help you retain sight? And you put on perhaps a black t-shirt like you have on now. You get some Post-its, some round rim glasses, you get all in the design mojo. You take a couple days and you come back, and you come up with an idea, and you say, you know what? I think I can design an app that describes the world to you, right? I think I can actually, here, I'm going to grab the engine. I'm going to create an app that will describe the visual world. And this is fantastic. This is fantastic. If I were losing my eyesight, would I use it? Maybe. Personally, maybe, right? I think it's a lot of help. It will describe the people that I'm meeting, also labels in the grocery store. Lots of kind of societal misalignments are solved through this technology. However, I want to call attention to you. You've only asked me one question, right? There's no hard feelings. Because I framed it. You didn't get to tell. You only asked me what I would lose with disability. Does that make sense? The loss of eyesight was a detriment, a deficit. It was a problem. It became a problem statement that design can then come in and solve. So we're still in this strange paradigm where we see disability as a loss, even though we've progressed as a design mainstream into a new paradigm. And this is where I think incompleteness comes in. I think we can also ask, what can we gain? What are the beneficial parts of living with a disability? Right? I've lived with a disability my entire life. I use lots and lots and lots of this assistive technology, and I'm still spectacularly disabled. Design's not gonna change that. And I'm happy, right? Shana Garfield embodies this idea of what we can gain with disability if we let it be this kind of creative prompt. So Shana is a designer, an environmental activist, and she was diagnosed with Lyme disease not too long ago. Already a lover of the environment, she was catapulted into an interdependent and intimate relationship with the environment that she had never experienced before. It made her start thinking about climate change. So Shana, with this new perspective and this new interconnectedness with the world, started to create, we wanted to conceptualize a new system for end of life, for the burial system specifically. And she started thinking about climate change. And she also, being an environmental activist, wanted to pose one challenge, and that was a challenge to human exceptionalism, where we place our needs above that of the environment. And she thought we could design a new way. She also found in her research that in the burial process, on average, Americans use about 800,000 gallons of formaldehyde. The problem with that is that as the body decomposes and dematerializes, that formaldehyde goes from the body back into the environment. Formaldehyde is a known carcinogen. So that's a big problem. Further, it locks us away from the environment that we know and love so much. So Shana needed to design a new system. So she created leaves. And her solution to the formaldehyde conundrum was thread. And in this thread is a healthy fungi. And that fungi will help in the decomposition process. It actually digests all of the harmful toxins that are in our bodies as human beings living in an industrial society. And it only leaves helpful nutrients for the earth, such as oxygen and nitrogen. So a cemetery in Shana's model becomes much more like a forest than a cemetery, right? Creativity springs from disability, and we have this kind of regenerative model and a real good framing of how disability can start to reshape and be integral to the creative process rather than being positioned as a problem that the creative process overcomes. The next project I want to share with you is a friend, Hannah Sawyer. Hannah's here on the right, or your left. She created a project called This Body is Worthy. And it came out of when she finished art school. She wanted to start working with a photographer friend to capture areas of her body that she was self-conscious of for a while. So she started to photograph this, and as she started to photograph her body, and getting more pride in her body, she saw the project start to expand. This body is worthy creates a space where bodies that fit out of the social ideal can be celebrated and embraced. So she has plenty of people taking this brief and contributing to this movement. We also see that it expands past just what we would consider quote-unquote disability into a larger diversity set. The last project I'm going to share with you is this really interesting project by Alex Hogarth. She's a Canadian designer. Alex is autistic. And they wanted to design art prompts based on the autistic experience. So, like many art prompts, there are about 30 here. And what I loved about this when I was following it is that number 15 says glitter. And we had one respondent say, I get everything else, what do you mean, glitter? What does that mean? So Alex says, perfect. So she starts to explain and says, well, actually, autism is a spectrum, right? It's also fluid. It's not the same all day long. So there are points in Alex's experience where she wants high stimulus. And in those moments, glitter is one of her favorite stimulus. So this respondent says, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. That makes me think of this project. And it's a project by Team Lab. Would you think about that if I said design something for autism? Or design something with autism? I love this is because it takes disability not as a design problem, but it positions it as a unique experience in the world, as a unique culture, as a culture, as an identity worth celebrating, worth taking props from. Accessibility definitely needs to continue. It's incredibly important. I use it every day. Dragon stopped on me the other day and I flipped out. Right? That's my voice technology system. But I also think that as a design mainstream, we need to make space for disability identity. Now, this point of view is not unique. And I showed you that slide way in the beginning with all the names because that's part of the community that is informed, even if they haven't been explicitly mentioned in these slides, this point of view. What I want to call your attention to is this timeline and the social model of disability that I was talking about, right? The one that started in the 60s and the 70s. It took until 2001 for the World Health Organization to adopt that model and start legislating on it. The only thing I want to show you here is that if you want to learn about disability, it makes sense to, I think the default when we want to learn about disability is to go to doctors, right? To go to medical practitioners. It's really important to also understand that this thinking about disability arises from the community, arises from the activist community, the grassroots community. So because we're all headed to work, many of you want action item, I'm sorry, I know you already have a big to-do list. But the next project that you have, I want you to engage with the community. If you're thinking about accessibility, go on Facebook, go on Twitter. I know a bunch of you are tweeting it right now. Check us out, we talk a lot. Learn these paradigms and this kind of fluidity of disability and the value of disability and how that can shift and shape our design projects. It's fairly easy. So we've talked about the construct of normalcy, what it means to be normal, and lack thereof. We've talked about the new paradigm, this kind of social paradigm where it's not the individual who is deficient, but it's a disabling society that causes disability. And then we've also talked about disability being integral and cultural identity. So I'm a designer, and of course, after I found this really great example for my talk, I also wanted to check out the typography in the app, right? So I started to check out Team Lab. Actually, I hadn't heard of them before I saw this thread. And I found this little icon, and I thought it was incredibly ironic that the icon of Team Lab, their logo, has a star. If you think about where we started, the construct of normality, K-delay is starting to average stars. So I'm going to leave you with one thought, one statement. I think the questions that we ask become the stars we follow. Thank you so much.